How is technology making renting a nightmare for Australians?
And why are scammers making more money from us than ever?
Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award winning tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading journalists and commentators to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, or at least I'm a reasonable AI led facsimile of him, and I'm joined as usual by an AI's artistic interpretation of Adam Turner. There's something that's still not quite right about the beard, though.
Hey man, the goatee is an artistic choice and I stand by it.
Yeah, but usually the goatee is drawn on the chin, sir, not coming out of the ears.
True, true. We
That
might need
AI's
to
still got some
workshop that.
work
Yeah.
to go. We're also joined this week, once again, by Erin Turner, CEO of the Consumer Policy Research Centre. Erin, welcome back to the show. How can we be sure that you're not actually three AIs in a trench coat?
Oh, look, you're going to have to listen to my answers and see if they make sense. They may or may not, depending on the day and the mood.
Hmm. You're walking through the desert and you find a turtle and you tip it on its back.
What consumer rights does the turtle have?
Yes, I know it's a tortoise. I can hear you shouting.
So while the people shout, Erin is here to help us secure the rights for that Mr. Squiggle podcast we're determined to produce any day now. Well, okay, she's not. Because once again, we're diving into the world of consumer rights. But before we look into how technology is making our lives and finances a misery, basically, let's see if we can find any other happier news over at the Vertical Hold news desk. Yeah, it doesn't look like it, frankly, because we've got to start this week with our old friend Elon Musk. And look, we could just have a regular segment here. Elon Musk says something stupid. And this week it's that he wants to make his own Chat GPT clone called Truth GPT. Adam, are you excited for the Elon Musk
Oh
AI
my
led
gosh.
future?
He is the gift that keeps on giving. It's crazy. And the thing that you can't make this stuff up. He wants to create, and this is a direct quote from his interview, a maximum truth-seeking AI that tries to understand the nature of the universe. Like, what? What does that even mean? But what's really, I think, interesting is that, oh, hang on, it gets worse. He also said he wants to create an AI that cares about understanding the universe, so it's unlikely to annihilate humans because we're an interesting part of the universe.
He hasn't met Hal, has he?
So he wants AI to keep us for pets. This is like a Saturday Night Live skit, except they'd throw it out and go, "This is crazy." But what's really makes this ridiculous coming from Elon is that his ideas on what he thinks are right is what he thinks is reality. Like he's very Trumpian in that way. Like this is the same guy who claims to be a free speech absolutist, but will quickly ban you on Twitter if you dare side eye him. Right? So it's free speech as long as it agrees with him. So his definition of truth will be the exact same. It's Elon's truth, or else hit the road.
Aaron, would you run towards an Elon Musk led AI?
I don't think I have any uses for Elon's truth in AI form or others.
It does make me wonder though, because AI, it has been quite good historically at coming up with quite insane answers to things. How do we know that Elon's not actually already an AI?
Oh, I think, we might need proof of life sometime soon because based on everything that's happening on Twitter, a platform I once enjoyed, I'm trying to think back to that world. Yeah, it's entirely possible. He is the maddest AI, hell bent on ruining humanity.
He's still
We're
running version 1.0 though, clearly.
we're running a happy pod this week, such a happy pod. In slightly happier news, although I guess not happier if you're Google, a whole bunch of detail has leaked about its new foldable phone, the Pixel Fold, which apparently is going to launch at Google I/O with availability from then, but it's going to be an $1,800 US phone.
Ooh.
So, like, that's 2,200, something like that, Australian dollars. Aaron, could you see some premium phones do sell for that much? But Aaron, could you see yourself spending that much on a foldable phone?
I mean, it's real back to the 90s or early noughties vibes. I think I'm too old to go back to foldable phones, but you know what question I would ask before I bought it? Can I repair it? And
And the
if I
answer will be
can't,
no way.
exactly, why am I paying over $2,000 for a phone that I can't control?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Google, the other thing you've got to ask is, will you still be supporting it in 12 months' time?
Exactly.
One thing that will be getting increasing support, though, and this is a much more consumer centric story actually that should appeal to Erin. Uh, we've talked a lot about EVs on this show in recent months, and one of those topics that's just come up again and again and again. And a couple of weeks ago, when I was chatting to Jen Dudley Nicholson from AAP, she was mentioning this again that we needed a fuel efficiency standard to drive more. Pun intended, to drive more EVs, more fuel efficient cars into Australia, lower costs and so on, and we are getting one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you, Erin?
11. Easily. I get very easily excited for consumer affairs reform, but this is one, this has been so overdue. And I think it's in the news today that Australia is one of the last developed countries to put in something like this. We're behind, we're at the same pace as Russia. The EU's done it, the US has done it. It's time.
So how will we benefit from it?
So what it means is essentially we won't be a dumping ground for crap cars, cars that don't meet these very bare minimum basic standards on fuel efficiency can't be sold in Australia. And over time, the standards will improve even more. We'll develop a stronger market. We send signals to car companies that they can sell their excellent fuel efficient or green cars here. There will be a well developed and supported market. So we should see more EVs come in, and we should also just see more fuel efficient, better cars on our roads, which is wins all round.
And I would think more of them would then help bring down the price, wouldn't it? And then it's a virtuous cycle, I think they call it,
Yeah.
where things just keep getting better.
Better and cheaper. That's the goal.
Yeah, and look, it is one of those things where, to a certain extent, we may still see some of those slightly bodgy cars come in, and the way that the companies get around that is by then bringing more completely emission-free vehicles in, which is a win on that side, maybe not a win on the other side, but there will still be petrol cars out there for people who are absolutely, EV terrified for some time to come. And this doesn't affect, we should point out, I suppose, this doesn't affect existing cars. If you own an existing car which would not meet those standards, you would still be able to tootle it around town. And I presume also still sell it, although you may find the market for it is shrinking.
That's it. This is really about setting a direction. It's saying in the future, our market is going to be more efficient. It is going to be more green. This is something that'll help you for your next car purchase and the one after that.
So, traveling quickly overseas, because this is not a story which exactly affects Australians. It's just one of those curious things. Most Australians know Netflix. Most Australians subscribe to Netflix, or a lot of them do. And they're probably aware that the company started as a DVD by mail service. You'd get them by mail. The surprising news this week is that they're ending that service. And the reason I say it's surprising is I would have thought they would have ended it years ago, but apparently no. Come September this year in the States, they will mail out their last DVD in a red envelope.
Yep, I am surprised that it's still existing. But I know exactly what the market is. It's my grandparents who haven't figured out how. They've still got basically the equivalent of dial-up internet in regional Australia. They've just figured out DVD technology, and that's where they're comfortable. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a group of people who'll be a bit sad about that.
I thought that, like here, they've given it up years ago, and I suppose the infrastructure is probably very hit and miss in the US as well, but our infrastructure is not great. But we had Telstra and QuickFlix were the two big ones doing it.
Yeah.
More than 10 years ago, Telstra got out of it, sold all their DVDs and their customer list to QuickFlix, which also, like Netflix, then started to get into streaming. QuickFlix is dead and gone these days, so I don't think anybody's looking to get DVDs in the mail here.
No, no. Although, you know what? I reckon our public library still does a
Oh,
roaring
true.
trade.
Yes. Yeah, that is a good place to go. I don't know if they'll post them to you.
No, they
They,
won't. Well,
they
it depends on the
might.
library. Yeah.
It depends on the library and what your needs are. Like if they have services set up for people with specific needs, they might. So, Erin, we're here to talk about rent tech, which is basically the technology that people use when they rent. Now, I need to put a trigger warning here for people listening at home. I don't know about everyone else, but I hate real estate agents. I'm out. It's in the open. I'm not even gonna try and hide it. I hate them so much. So nothing they would do to screw people over would really surprise me that much. But you better tell us anyway. What is rent tech? what kind of things is it inflicting on renters?
It's inflicting a lot. And you know what's scary about this sector? Sometimes it's about real estate agents and real estate companies building the technology, but in other cases, it's really powerful technology companies that are branching into the rental market.
Mm.
So they previously ran the rental blacklist, for example, and now they're moving into the application process. And a lot of this is about how are these companies collecting your data, and unfortunately, how are they using it against you in the rental application process? So Choice put out this fantastic report. Complete bias note. I used to work there. I think their work is fantastic. They've gone really deep and they've had a look at the technology that's used to apply for a property, to pay for your rent, and there's some real problems in that category, and then rental management. How can you request a repair? And the challenge is none of these processes in the offline world work well or were designed really to work well for people who rent. They are worse in a lot of ways now that this technology has moved in.
That surprises me at one level. I mean, as Adam says, yeah, look, real estate agents have about as much credibility as, well, journalists, sadly. But that surprises me in the sense that I'd like to think that if you threw like a rental repairs section into an app, that should, in theory, be easier. It should be a lot simpler. And I will say it's been a long time since I've rented, but that should be a lot simpler. You know, if my washing machine breaks and it's part of the property, it should be simpler for me to simply go, washing machine broken, press buttons. They know instantly. I don't have to fill out a form. I don't have to phone anyone during office hours. It should be simpler and easier. So how is it worse?
Look, I think it goes back to what was wrong with the process before the technology stepped in. A lot of the, so there's some very awful case studies around repair issues and rental management tech. Basically, people put in their issues and then they hear nothing. It goes into a void, it gets lost. Sometimes the agent doesn't receive it. There was this one case where, the agent and the landlord and the renter were working together despite the technology. The technology seemed to make it harder. So it's just, I think part of this is you're actually speaking about a market here where the people who are using the service, people who rent, often aren't the customers or the people who the tech's designed for. It's
Mm.
designed for agents and sometimes it's designed for landlords. So the person who
So it's
rents
quite
is
lopsided.
it is a
Yeah.
very lopsided and a multi-sided market. So who the customer is gets quite challenging.
And that would be perhaps why tech companies are attracted to this sector because of that balance of power, and because in
Yes.
some ways this tech can be used by people who like to screw people to screw people.
And look, that's actually something that came through really strongly in the Choice report when they were talking about the problems across the board with rent tech. Number one was the lack of choice. Because if you're a person who rents, particularly in a tight market like we have in a lot of our major cities right now, if an agent tells you to do something, you very rarely have the practical option not to.
Mm.
If they say the only way you're going to be considered for this property that you desperately need is to apply using this very data invasive application form, there isn't really a way around that. So the idea of consumer choice, it's an illusion for a lot of these services.
Now, are we talking here about multiple apps? So if I need a property, am I entering my data into one app to then go and apply to rent it, and then another app to pay my rent, and then another app for managing any issues, or is it all one big conglomerate thing?
No, it's messy. And look, in a way, that's good. There's competition, but I don't think they're competing on good factors. I think they're competing on factors that are very unlikely to benefit people who rent. There's at least, or Choice has looked closely at seven different quite major pieces of tech in the application process, different ones together in rental payment and another one together in rental management, although there's this one app that sits across all three. So people are having to engage in very different ones. And if you think about that application process, if someone's going, you very rarely apply for one property and get it. You're often in that
Hmm.
chaotic process. You're applying for as many as you
Yeah.
can in a short time period. And you're trying to pack your house and it's awful all at once. So quite often people in that application process, they're using several of those apps. It's not necessarily making their lives easier.
And they can also end up footing the bill for the tech, even though they're not the ones who are really benefiting from it.
That's it. There's definitely been a push to monetize it. So one of the things that comes through, particularly say in the rental application process, a lot of these apps have an optional extra where you can pay for a background check. And you don't have to. They might make that clear, but your application might look a little bit better if you hand over the 25 or more dollars to say, hey, I am who I say I am. And then you've got this other issue in the payment apps. We're starting to see pay to pay issues emerge again. So, fees in order to make a payment or late fees that can be really excessive by using some of these payment services.
Isn't that illegal yet?
In some of this, yeah, I
Technical
wish.
question, I know, but you know.
So the answer is kind of. The rental laws are a mess. They are different in every state and territory. Some are relatively strong. Victoria's are pretty good. New South Wales has promises to improve them, but they're chaotic. They're different all over the place. And they are illegal in some states, there's a rule that you have to be given a reasonably accessible free way to pay. But you can drive a truck through that exception, and some of these agents, they're in the truck and they're driving.
Yeah.
They're driving hard.
So one of the things that I noticed in the choice report was they were talking about applications that required you to submit a photo of yourself. And this drew all sorts of red flags for me. And as I say, it's been a long time since I've rented, but I don't think I ever met or visually knew what my actual landlord, the owner of the property, ever looked like. I barely knew the people at the real estate agents. And to throw this back to the fact that I'm a very old man, there were periods in which I would actually front up to a real estate agents with actual money to hand over for my
Hand it
rent
over. Oh
at one
gosh.
point. I'm that old. But it feels like a privacy nightmare, but also a discrimination nightmare, because clearly we have rules and regulations that say you can't discriminate on age, sexuality, race, all these other factors. But if I'm handing over that photo and I happen to be a deeply racist landlord, I can simply go, well, no, no. Is there any oversight on this? Is there any regulation to stop that kind of abuse happening?
No, again, not really. We don't know. This is a data black box problem. We know what they're asking for. We don't know how they're using it, and that's just this. It's no one's able to check at the moment. One of the other additional layers of complexity here is that one of the few protections we might have is the Privacy Act. Most real estate agents aren't captured by the Privacy Act. They're a
Because they're
small
too
Why
small?
not? I
they're a
mean,
small business.
ah,
But
And
that's bullshit because they shouldn't it just apply to anybody who's holding it? Like they have to rethink that.
so this is the Privacy Act review is underway right now, and this is one of the contentious issues. The Real Estate Institute of Australia came out and said, "Don't change the law. It's
Oh, funny
regulatory."
that.
I,
Yeah.
I know, and
shocked.
I think it's one of the most outrageous things because, like, for me as a consumer, if Optus loses my data or to a scammer or a hack, or my real estate institute agency loses my data, the consequences are exactly the same for me.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if it's a small or a large business. And in fact, do I even know if it's a small or a large business? So it's absurd that we have these loopholes when it's a safety and a protection issue. That needs to be universal. So I'm hoping the government stands strong on this, but I think it's going to be one of those controversial components of the reform as it goes through.
And we've already seen some data breaches of real estate agents, haven't we? I think it was LJ Hooker and
LJ Hooker.
Harcourt.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's it. And you think about the data that they hold. I recently applied for a rental and I was being asked for things like I have to hand over a copy of my passport, my driver's license, my Medicare card, bank statements. So they get,
Medicare card.
yep, all of it. It's every bit of sensitive data. So they're
Wow.
collecting this. I don't know where they're storing it. I don't know if they delete it. I doubt they do. They are keeping some of the most highly sensitive data out there. It
Hmm.
is, yeah, it's
And this
really
is
ripe for
this is exactly
exploitation.
the stuff with Optus that we were complaining just a few episodes ago. It feels like
Hmm.
that they should be perhaps viewing to verify identity. I think that's not an unreasonable thing in itself. And then going, yep, we've cited that. That's
You
all we
don't need to
need.
keep it.
We
Yeah,
don't need a copy.
burn it.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. Once you know
Maybe
who
don't
I
burn your
am,
passport; they're expensive, but burn their copy of
burn
that
the
image.
copy. Yeah, this is it. They shouldn't be holding on to this data. And we don't know what they're using it for after the fact. A lot of these, again, this is in the choice report, it's really well outlined. The privacy policies of these companies aren't clear. In a lot of cases, it looks like they can bundle, they can sell this data, they can do other things, commercial things with the data you're providing them. And That terrifies me. I don't know what all of this very sensitive data is being used for.
Aren't there? I mean, I would have thought that some of the regulations, some of the existing regulations, leaving aside these places are small businesses, aren't there rules and regulations around this stuff? I mean, is there stuff that they're potentially contravening? And if there's not, why not?
Yeah, yeah. If not, why not?
Come on,
Um,
Erin, you're not trying hard enough. It's
No.
your job to make them change the law.
I will find it. Look, when we think about the laws that apply to this, they're actually quite minimal. We've got the Privacy Act, we've got the Consumer Law, and then there might be a few others you can state-based rental laws, but there's actually a lot of it doesn't quite fully capture property tech or rent tech. It's these companies kind of sit between it. There's no rule that companies have to be responsible with your data, that they have to do the right thing or the fair thing. And that's what CPRC has been writing about quite a lot in the last few months. We need laws that say, don't mess with our data. Please don't use it against me. Please don't exploit it. Because I think that, I mean, it's a very bare minimum expectation, but there's no obligation in the laws that companies have to do that now.
Is it fair to assume that if this kind of thing was happening to the owners of investment properties rather than the renters, there'd be outrage and it'd be fixed quickly?
Oh, look, I will give owners of investment properties this credit. One of the challenges here is we don't know. These companies aren't transparent. I have no idea what they're doing with what they collect, which is at the heart of a lot of this problem. I- if investors didn't know and if renters didn't know, these companies can still get away with quite a bit, and they can monetize things in ways that can be deeply unfair. But
So they
I
might be
can't
taking
control it.
landlord's data as well.
For all I know, but I
Yeah.
think it's probably less likely they have a lot
Yeah.
less of that. But this is as much a problem about a lack of transparency from technology companies as it is about power imbalance in the rental market.
Mm.
Those two issues are smashing together to create an unfair mega problem.
So, what's the solution? If there's a
First,
mega problem,
The real
what's the
estate
mega
agents.
solution?
Choice has a bunch of recommendations, and I agree with all of them. But they kind of boil down to first, fix the Privacy Act, get
Mm.
rid of the small business exception, make the laws stronger. Our Privacy Act is stuck in the 80s. Something CPRC wants to see is something like a best interest duty. When companies have your data, they shouldn't use it against you. In fact, I'd love the even higher standard of they should use it in your interests rather than exploit it and take advantage of it. So if we do that, we're a long way ahead. The other thing, and you've heard me talk about this before, we need an unfair trading prohibition,
Mm.
something that
Mm.
stops unfair business practices. Those two protections in tandem will deal with a lot, not necessarily all, but a lot of this. And then you get into the other problem of AI, invasive tech. How are these companies making decisions? There is a conversation Australia needs to have about regulating AI. And we're a bit further behind compared to, say, where the EU and other countries are at.
So there's actually some potentially at least better, if not best practice models out there that we could be adopting.
Exactly. Other countries have figured out these problems, or at least are starting to chip away at them in better ways. Australia's behind on a lot of fronts, but that means we can learn from them and take the best laws. So I'm still optimistic. We can fix it. We just got to get on with it.
To put my devil's advocate hat on, which I've borrowed from Alex,
Ah,
um, they would people on the other side would argue that um, bias comes from people. Like that
hmm,
landlord can look at the photo and go, "Don't look like the look of that bloke," or I'm not having a bloody real estate agent living in my. They can be prejudiced, but in theory, if you let a machine make these decisions and just do it on a basic point score, okay, this is your income, this is your profession, this is your rental history. We're giving you a score out of 100. They would argue that what they're doing is actually fairer. But everything we've heard about unintended and unseen bias in AI tells us that's not necessarily the case, is it?
that's it. And look, a part of this is it comes back to transparency. You can say it's theoretically could be fairer, but like what data are you using? How are you using it? And how are you checking that the outcomes are actually spitting out the ones that you want, those fair
Yeah.
outcomes? And unless you're being transparent about all of that, I cannot believe that your tech is better than a human yet. You need to have that level of transparency to go like, all right, yeah. Because tech theoretically could be better. It's just, give me the receipts. I need to know that you're actually following through on that hypothetical. The other element is that we one of the big challenges here, I think one of the great injustices of this whole discussion around applications and renting, we're talking about the most essential service. I
Mm.
don't have to jump through hoops to prove that I'm a responsible person to get my energy connected or to get a telephone account, but I do for a house and a home. And we haven't reconciled the fact that the way we provide housing in Australia isn't the fairest way to go about it, and it means that actually it exacerbates a lot of the inequality in in our country. We we shouldn't make it so hard to get a home. That is a bigger thing to explore, and
Yeah.
probably multiple podcasts.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is this a reflection of just that bigger issue in Australia, that imbalance of power and who housing is for and how we go about it?
Yeah, that is the like power imbalance, assumptions, how we allocate housing.
Mm,
That there's that problem, and then there's the tech problem, and they're together in rent tech. It's you can feel the depth of the unfairness here. It's not how the world should work.
Well, I mean, getting back to that choice report, one of the things that really made my blood boil, and I think it plays to this whole we don't know how the algorithms work thing. One of the questions that they were allowed to ask was whether or not you'd ever applied to a rental
Tribunal.
affairs tribunal
oh,
in case of a dispute. Now, you're not allowed to discriminate on that basis, but they're asking the question. So if I'm a renter, I'm immediately going to think, oh, I don't really want to say yes because how do I know that's not a -5 on my secret score?
Yeah, they're asking, do you know your rights and have you
yeah,
used them?
Yeah,
yeah,
which should not be a problem, and in many ways should be a gold tick. You know exactly what your rights
yeah.
and obligations are in that case. You've probably been through all of this, but I'm sure it'd be seen as a negative. And I think this gets to the other side of the algorithm that um, the numbers might be right, but if people are setting the questions in that way,
Mm.
the numbers are never going to be fair.
No, exactly. It's tech is exacerbating the underlying unfairness, and it's just ramping it up to 10. So this is, yeah, I think Choice has done such a good job on this report, and I hope it already looks like some of these companies have responded softly in some ways. They're like, oh, we'll get rid of the star rating score. We didn't mean to do that. Oh, sorry, that's not what we intended. So that we can see a couple of companies backing away from some of the worst features that are publicly there. It's just that we don't know what's under the hood in a lot of these.
So I do a lot of radio, and it feels like about every third time I'm on radio, I get asked about scams, about Australians falling victim to scams, about the numbers of scams, about how to avoid scams. And it feels, I'll be honest here, like I've been educating people about this forever. And yet this week, Erin, we've actually seen a report which suggests that in 2022, Australians lost more to scams than ever before in rising amounts. Am I just really, really bad at my job?
No, scammers are getting more sophisticated and it's getting harder. Although, yeah, silver lining, I'm not sure if I should say it's silver lining. Fewer people lost money, but those who lost money lost more. So I
Well,
don't
that's
know if that means your
interesting.
message is getting through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting worse, but in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, look, the numbers are kind of terrifying. I
They
mean,
are.
just skimming off the top, what is it? Investment scams, $1.5 billion. Remote access scams, $229 million. Payment redirection scams, $224 million. An 80% increase on total losses compared to 2021. It's a lot.
It's huge and it's terrifying, and I know it feels overwhelming. I think that, like, there's only so much that education can do here as well, because these scams are getting increasingly sophisticated. It's, I think we all saw the hi mum
Mm.
scams that came
Mm.
out that I think a lot more people got captured by. The It wasn't just like, hello, I am a prince from Nigeria and I need to give you $1 million.
I know
Starting,
him, actually.
hey, have you got your million?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's in the post.
You just have to send a little bit back.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've gone from the comical scam, or almost the like,
Mm.
oh, how did people fall for that, to actually it's these scammers are getting increasingly sophisticated. They look like your business next door. They look like your son and daughter. They look like people you interact with all the time. And in fact, they might be using their face and name. And that gets so hard to navigate. We need to start thinking a lot more about how do we get systems and structures in place to stop as many of these scams as possible before they hit consumers.
And that's the way I explain it to people, is that scams used to look too good to be true,
Yeah.
which became easy to spot. Now they look too mundane to be fake.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
Mm.
The one I almost fell for one the other day. I was selling something on Gumtree, and there's this person's like, "Oh, hey, great. Can I grab this?" And they're like, "Oh, great. I'll pay by Pay ID." And I'm like, "Cool. Here it is." And they're like, "Oh, wait. No, I need you to click a link and approve something before I can pay you on Pay ID." I was like, "Hang on. Smell like a scam." But it was such a normal It was a very normal conversation
Yeah.
until that point. Nothing felt off about it, which is yeah, it's really really hard. And I hope it can help us deal with some of the shame that comes with a
Mm.
lot of these scam conversations.
Well, the report actually noted, and this was interesting, something like 30% of victims, or their estimate was
Yeah.
30% of victims don't report scams to anyone. And that's got to play into that shame factor. I can't believe that I fell for a scam. So actually, all of those huge, horrifying numbers I was talking about a couple of minutes ago, they're actually worse,
Yeah, so the headline number is that Australians lost 3.1 billion in 2022.
at
Real
least.
Yeah, yeah, add that huge caveat that we know of. And that's like it's so worrying. It's such a waste.
Mm.
This is a huge economic drain. So that I am the government has made this priority. I think Minister Jones has really come out and said, "Hey, we're going to deal with this." And I'm hoping we get some really tangible and practical reforms out of that help make it easier for individuals because we can't be expected to navigate this as consumers anymore.
Now, most of these scams come in through the phone, either a phone call or a text message.
Well, I'll interrupt you there, Adam,
Yeah.
because I've got some stats on this, and it does have one silver lining for us again. So scam calls, that whole hello, I am calling from Microsoft, your bank, the ACCC, I need the Apple gift cards to pay your tax
I'm
lien,
calling from
whatever.
Telstra NBN.
Yeah.
Oof.
So reports about scam calls actually decreased nearly 56%, way, way down. But that's because text messages took over. If you're
Mm.
getting scammed, it's via SMS, or increasingly, it's via SMS.
So it's not because I was going to say that the pressure is on the telcos to crack down on these. And I know Telstra keeps making a big deal of how many scam messages they stop, but I don't know what percentage that is of what they get through. Should Could they be doing more? Should they be doing more?
So the ACCC raises this really interesting proposal in their report when they put it out on ScamWatch. Singapore has introduced something called SMS Sender ID. So can you tell, is the ATO really texting me?
Oh,
Is it the ATO? And this is the kind of infrastructure that would be really useful. It's the same with bank account issues. Can I tell, am I actually sending money to Erin Turner, or is it someone pretending to be Erin Turner? Dealing with that, it's not going to clean up everything. I think it is almost impossible to reduce all scams, but we want to make a serious dent in that number.
Is that, and I don't know the Singapore setup, but I could imagine Singapore being a relatively controlled, small economy, lots of government pressure in there. Is that something, though, that's going to be much harder to implement here? Hard is not impossible, but harder to implement here because of the nature of the market.
Definitely, I think there's got to be a feasibility discussion. But on the
Mm,
bank, so the bank pay ID element or
mm,
confirmation of payee, are you sending money to the person you actually think you're sending money to? The technology exists. In the
mm.
UK, they're rolling it out. Some banks in Australia have already committed to it, but it requires banks to invest in their technology. These are the kind of things that will add up and make a difference over time.
So, I mean, I've already kind of accused myself of being very bad at my job.
Oh,
Apart from telling people, look, text messages are on the rise, and maybe that investment scam that is still too good to be true is too good to be true. David Koch and Dick Smith do not want to tell you the secret that banks don't want you to know, all that kind of stuff.
R.I.P. Koshy. If only he was still with us.
Well, if what should we be putting in the messaging to people? I mean, what not just what should we as professional communicators, but the listeners of this podcast, if they're talking to, and again, I'm going off the ScamWatch report, they're increasingly elderly people are being targeted by this, or it seem to be losing more money to this. What should they be communicating? What should we all be having a discussion about around the dinner table to make sure our friends and relatives aren't falling victim to this?
look, I'm going to give you the advocate's answer on this, which is I think the time has come. We still need to talk about education and talking to people to help them individually navigate it. But I want to see a shift in the conversation to say what infrastructure and supports can we put in place so my nan never gets that text message. That should be our goal here. And I think that's things like confirmation of payee, SMS sender ID. And I'm going to come back to our other conversation about rent tech. Is the Privacy Act strong enough? Because if we're going back, kind of like the source of a lot of these challenges, data breaches increase a risk of scam and fraud. If a company isn't handling my data responsibly, if my phone number, if my email, if my personal contact details can get into the hands of others, there is a greater risk that I or someone I love will lose money. So we've got to get more businesses collecting less data and storing it well, because that is part of the solution here.
Because when they know more about you, they can be very convincing. They can ring up and say, "Oh, hi, Erin. We know who you are. You live at 123 Credibility Street," and they know enough about you. They go, "Oh, yeah, you must be Telstra or whoever."
Yeah.
Adam, please don't dox our guests.
No, I'm gonna have to move from 123 Credibility Street now, aren't I? But yeah, this is part of it. And when we have massive organizations like the Institute of Australia saying our real estate agents shouldn't have to comply with the Privacy Act,
Let's
I
dox
get.
them.
I'm so disappointed because this is in part like just do the right thing, man. Like don't be a jerk with data. But part of it's actually come back to this scams conversation. We're losing billions of dollars. We're all going to have to treat data more respectfully in order to solve this problem.
Well, that just about wraps up this week's episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Erin for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me. Anytime.
And you've been a guest on the show before, Erin. You know what you're about to face. The Vertical Hold 3 questions of doom. I will ask all 3, answer them in any order you like. Where can people find your work online? Where can they find you on whatever remains of social media by the time people are listening to this? And given your long-term status as one of Australia's leading consumer advocates, we've talked a lot about consumer rights this episode, but what's another consumer right that you think Australians ignore or don't know about or get ripped off by over and over again? What gets you angry in this space?
I feel like you ask these questions to torture me because I can't give you one answer. So much annoys me. But I will give you the easy answers first. Head over to cprc.org.au. You can read all our nerdy reports, including a recent one on privacy reform and why businesses should act in your best interests. I'm on Twitter still, barely, Erin L. Turner. If you can find me, if the platform still exists, come say hi. And of rights you don't know about. I'm not sure if I even gave you this one last time, but it's your consumer guarantee rights. If something breaks within a reasonable period, a company should fix it. And it's most often they're like, oh no, our warranty it might expire in 3 years. So the business will tell you, no, we're not going to do anything here. But your consumer law rights are so much stronger. They're so much better. Companies rarely tell you about it, and yeah, you can get that broken fridge fixed. That's the right I love, and I wish more people could use.
So to paraphrase the Beastie Boys, you've got to fight for your right to get a refund.
Yes, exactly. You've got to fight for your right outside of warranty.
Excellent. We can put that to a beat, I'm sure. While I work on that possible copyright infringing song, you can catch us online at Vertical Hold AU on Twitter, at the Vertical Hold Facebook page, at Vertical Hold on Instagram, or at verticalhold.com.au on the web.
And as always, thanks everyone for dropping by. Drop us a line. Let us know what your experiences have been with RentTech, what your experiences have been with scams, and let us know how you're doing in 2023.
Yeah.
I think, it will also depend on your prescription and so on, but we've just turned into the old people's glasses podcast. So
there's a market for that.
There's a market.
There is a market for
the
that.
3 people on this call are part of that market.